Hello everybody, welcome to the panel on reciprocity and impact of Ayahuasca tourism. The word reciprocity in its Latin origin means coming back and forth. It means it has to do with giving and obtaining. And what it basically means is a phenomenon that can be observed by everybody of us, which is that when somebody receives something, they feel a debt towards the source of what they got. Depending on the size of what you got, this internal debt you feel is more or less as big or smaller. But there is an internal process within the person, namely that this person is not feeling well. You feel it internally till you haven't cancelled the debt somehow. So it's a natural process, as I said, that when somebody helps you, you want to give it back. And when somebody helps you in a positive way, in a good way, you also want to give back in a positive and good way. Somebody helps you. The instinct is to help this person back. Now, we are in a situation, which I think this is why almost everybody are here, where many Westerners, let's say Westerners, because we could say it also from the perspective of Amazons, call ourselves gringos. Many gringos get and feel they have got much help in many aspects of their life through their contact with the plants, and they also feel a need and a desire to give back. And this is important and it is good. There is also a dark side of reciprocity, which is often forgotten, which is vengeance. Vengeance is also a form of reciprocity. Reciprocity works in the positive and the negative sense. You want to give back what is good, but also what is bad. So in reciprocity, there's also always a dark side. Likewise, the phenomenon of tourism also has a dark side. In this case, it has not to do with vengeance, but with a set of dynamics that is much more complex, and it has to do with the fact that helping the other, that is in reciprocity, giving back the help we've obtained, and especially helping the others in an effective way, is a much more complex process than what it seems or what it should be looking like, as the therapeutists know, and social workers and teachers, and generally speaking everybody who somehow makes their problems on their own. Help not as a concept but as an effective action. Effective help is something that is incredibly or surprisingly difficult to be done well. And what you're going to see here is how a bunch of people with good, even with the best intention, who have got a very big aid for them and their lives, when they decide to give back, they find, especially when they decide to give back that help and they don't know how to do it in an effective way, they are within a whole set of problematic dynamic, which the dark side of this ayahuasca tourism or reciprocity in general, everything is being done with the best intention of the world, but from outside, and over the time you can see a whole set of effects that is not positive. So today in here, this panel, we're going to talk about this, about ayahuasca tourism, about the positive effects, about the negative effects, and we're going also to look at the reciprocity concept as a perspective, as a point from where you can approach these phenomena and get some hints or a possible interesting way. I'll start talking of tourism in general, and I'll focus on something specific, which is the paradox of tourism. The paradox of tourism that comes from an academic concept of tourism studies, which is based on the paradox effect of the search of tourism. I'm not talking specifically of ayahuasca tourism, but tourism in general. The paradox of tourism is that precisely what they are looking for, the object of search of tourism, empty beaches, pristine nature, places with no other tourists, precisely the object of search for tourism. Once they find it, well, they tend towards destroying it. Paradigm of that is Phanang beach in Thailand, which became famous through a movie. Often we don't know the name of the first foreigner who came to this beach in the late 70s, and he discovered an endless pristine beach with only one family of Thai fishermen, and that person came to the conclusion that this person had found paradise, so this person stayed there. One time when he came out, he told a couple of Germans, he told them, please keep the secret. And 40 years after, it's a place where famous full moon parties take place. The beach is full of bars, a big problem of sustainability. And this is the paradox of tourism, precisely. What they were looking for is what is eventually destroyed. This is one aspect, and this also takes other shapes in non-pristine areas like the cities. And the effect of tourism on the cities is that it basically creates a compressed version of the city. The people need a tour. They are going to spend 3, 5, or 7 days in the city, and they are looking for a reduced version of everything. They have to visit this museum, this other place, and so on. As these tours are being created, they are creating a sort of path within the map of a city. And right now, with cheap flights, cheap traveling, paradoxical phenomenon comes out in all cities like London, Paris, Berlin, Spain, when 50% of the people in the city are locals and the other 50% are visitors, tourists, people on their way through. Only in the biggest cities like Shanghai, this is the other way around, and there is only 2 places for tourists. That is, it's not the locals and tourists. It's the same size. So what occurs is that when a group of people have the same size, as big as the ones who live there, look for a tour, the amount of money these people leave behind is as big as to retrace the city structure. So the whole economy, everything is placed around this tour, followed by these people, and a new map is created. The urban landscape is reshaped. This is 2 extreme examples of tourism. There is another aspect that is even more curious, which is around voluntourism. Voluntourism is a new phenomenon. It has become very current because people on the longer trip want to take part on an aid or development project and so on. In this case, the example I'm going to give comes from an interview I heard with a woman who has an orphanage in an orphan house in Nigeria, because that woman was very skeptical, because she says that the first she said is this person wants to help. if she spent, instead of spending 3 months at an orphanage, including the flight trips and so on, $4,000, $5,000 and so on. This person told me if I had been given this orphanage on the spot, I could work for 2 months. I wouldn't have to show my way through to foreign and so on. So what she was worrying about is that what occurs in the end is a dilemma of whom are we serving here? The needs of whom? The needs of the volunteer who needs to feel well, or the needs of the vulnerable populations, which are in theory the ones who need this help? When there is money in between, when this volunteering person with all good intentions leaves some money, this becomes more complex. In the world of ayahuasca, what I wanted to say is how comes that these people dare to go to places where they don't know anybody and work on something for which they have no training, when in their own countries they had never dared to do something like this. This is something to do often at the ayahuasca centers. People find it inconceivable to build an ayahuasca center in a faraway country, and they ask you, would you build up a hotel here? Well, it's very tricky. I've never managed a hotel and so on. So this helps understand the dilemma. I want to say that there are good examples. I've looked for examples from tourism. They always stem from the fact that the communities get hold of the process, the fluxes, flows, and protocols to try and keep at bay unsustainable situations, or easier things like there are a set of operations that they plant 2 trees for a day for every tourist that comes, and they try to be CO2 neutral in terms of all the trips of those coming and leaving are neutral. There are different ways and also different attempts at doing so. And during today's speech, you're going to see good and bad examples of how this can work. So the first is Carlos Suárez, and he's going to explain us the effects, the negative effects of tourism in ayahuasca centers on traditional medicine. Erika Oblak will talk about, will place tourism in a wider context. And finally, José López and I will have a small dialogue on the indigenous perspective. So thank you very much, and I give the floor to Carlos Suárez.
Buenos días.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jairo has introduced me as being negative, but I'm not. I'm just going to tell some jokes about what is occurring. Last week, as it happens often, someone wrote me asking me to recommend a traditional shaman. Well, traditional to me, it gets stuck because I get cold sweat. And there's the obsession for the tradition is an obsession that is not only of the newcomers, of the ones who come for the first time to get to know shamanism and ayahuasca. It's an obsession also by people who are working in that systematically, like the hostels and Iquitos who receive thousands of foreigners every year. They offer in their websites traditional treatments. I think that this fixation on the traditional is due to the fact that that word sounds legitimate. It's a way, as if it were a way of legitimating and that this treatment of shaman is good because they're traditional. But the question I'm trying to resolve is a foreigner, a Westerner, coming to Iquitos, taking ayahuasca, can receive a traditional treatment or not? Well, the question is wrongly asked. It's a catch question, because tradition is a catchword. What is tradition? Tradition is a practice passing over from generation to generation. It's an orthodoxy, it's a way of doing things that is replied over time. The problem is that the ayahuasca, curanderism, practiced in the Ullacali, Marañón, Iquitos, High Amazon. This is the curanderism that became international, through which many got to know ayahuasca. This system is an heterodox system. It's a system that is in permanent evolution with a big diversity. So how comes that is so heterodox? Well, this is because the Amazon societies are egalitarian, without hierarchies. No adult can tell another adult what they have to do, nor can they force them through legitimate ways, like the legislators, policemen, or judges. You can force somebody, but you cannot through through socially legitimated mechanism, the orthodoxy of the medical system or ritual system can only be set by the elite. In our case, the medical associations and the church have these mechanisms to oblige you or to prevent you from doing things. So this cannot exist in an egalitarian society. So no orthodoxy can be. There can be no orthodoxy. Now, you could think, okay, but there are a set of elements that are common to all these curanderos. Okay, but I can't call that traditional. In this presentation, I'm going to take that local treatments, and what will I call traditional treatments? It's the new treatments that have been invented by the hostels. But what is the difference between these local and modern traditional treatments? They are substantial in many cases. The first and fundamental is the use applied in ayahuasca. The ayahuasca in the local system is the tool of a curandero to link up with the spirits, get information about what disease the patient has, what medicine they have to obtain and receive to heal us. And you go to the ceremonies and the patients don't take it, especially if they are sick. But vis-a-vis that, the new traditional treatments, taking ayahuasca is crucial and indispensable. No one will pay $1,000 to spend one week in Iquitos to sit on one night and getting chants. There's a belief at ayahuasca that the faith is conducted from the world of spirits to the molecules contained there. So much faith in the molecules that they take it 6 times in 10 days, 4 times in 6 days, a frequency that is absolute unheard of. But of course there are exceptions. I'm generalizing, which I'm sure that people can find many exceptions, but I think it sets quite an irrelevant trend. Well, of course, the locals, as I'm going to take the people from there, cannot take ayahuasca if they want. There are people doing so. And of course, there are people taking ayahuasca all night, but they can do it a certain time. But why do they use so? The most common reason is to get free from bad energies. And it's not random that in the Peruvian forest, the ayahuasca is called the cleansing. And the cleansing properties are in the vine. But the Westerners coming to Iquitos will come with the obsession of the view. What they want is to have visions that are theoretically produced by DMT, I see in theory, because the disappointment of those coming through the Iquitos hostels is incredible. They expect to see things, colorful things, and they spend night in the dark and with nauseas, saying, "Okay, what did I get into?" This belief that DMT in the vision is the most important, it's not only for us newcomers. Take any scientific text, for instance, the overview given by Suárez. And most scientists will tell you that the vapors in the vine has the only function to have the DMT work. This is, of course, an interpretation that is against what I consider local practices, where ayahuasca, in my opinion, is the key. And both in Colombia and in Peru, ayahuasca and yahe are words used for both the vine and the remedy with or without chacrona. And ayahuasca, not DMT, is what is locally important vis-a-vis the interpretation. But medical treatments are much more than some techniques and molecules. There are social components, environmental components, and moral components as well. And there is also a substantial difference, which I think is important to point out. First, money, which is one of the most controversial issues. In Iquitos, for instance, I've stated that there are up to 70 hostels that perhaps receive, you can never establish that, but between 15,000 and 20,000 people coming to these hostels every year. Considering that $1,000 is the average price, we could say it's a hypothesis which is very difficult to state, but let's say that 15 to 20 million dollars are flocking into most hostels that are mostly controlled by foreigners, but some locals do it also well. The relation is that there's a profanation, but okay, locally, ayahuasca curanderism is a professional open system that is people who make money for their work. Then we'll see the differences, and the difference is obvious in the local system. No accumulation may occur due to certain social mechanisms by which the locals work vis-a-vis the new context of the ayahuasca hostels, where accumulation is important. Why do I say that nobody can accumulate? How comes that there is an egalitarian community without being here? Due to the productive economy, men and women have the necessary knowledge when they're married to use the forest to their benefit, to live a life in abundance without damaging the forest. They live well. So there is no productive specialization, there's no destruction of nature, and so on. Now, the man has to do some things and the woman the others. One of them is a curandero. They have to take care of the sick people. They have often 4 to 5 people at home, so you have to do ceremonies by night and you cannot go hunting and so on. So the position is unsustainable, unbearable if there is no compensation for the work they do. Therefore, this ayahuasca curanderism system, professional and open, requires money. And the difference is that in these new hostels, there is accumulation process because they are in the market economy, which is exactly like I am. I'm not criticizing them. I'm part of the same. So just if you think, no, I'm not accusing the hostels of anything, but there is accumulation. And not only that, in the local systems, while the patients are duties that are borne by vacation, the new spaces, the patients staying there are $100, $150, $200. It's not. I'm not saying it's bad, but you have to take it into account. Right. There are other differences. For instance, environmental differences. I found it funny, it shocked me, Chris's presentation, because I was researching in 2013 this subject in Iquitos, and my conclusions are radically different. All this research, I've put it down in a book I'm going to introduce tomorrow at 10:30 in Hall 3, which is a profitable culture. And what I'm going to expand is, one, that around Iquitos, the vine has been eradicated in vast areas. And so because I'm saying it, you're going to hear the person who knows that. Secondly, there has been a surge of price. The wine price has multiplied by 4 by 5 with much money. So that involves a set of consequences for the locals. And third, there is an obvious and clear and apparent diminution of the quality of my raw materials, not by my standards, but by the standards of the people who process that. It's not me saying that, it's them saying that. And apart from all these differences, there are some moral differences. Hold on a moment, please. In local treatments, as many of you know, you often resort to Christian elements, curation, healings, the saints, and so on. But the moral operating is not Christian, it's not Catholic at all. On the contrary, the Westerners come to Iquitos renegating from denying their Western traditions, and they instill Catholic practices. Sorcery is a fundamental element of curanderism, because most sick coming to a curandero have been witched by a sorcerer, cursed by a sorcerer. So the apparent aggressor, when they get it, say, well, it wasn't me, and they sense to the other, and so on and so on. This becomes a mess of shamanic wars that are there always. But in the hostels, this doesn't exist. There's no sorcery. Look at the website, so where it talks of witchcraft, but it's an important element, and when you are in there, sooner or later you're going to deal with it. There is no curandero in the sense we're going to get there, find the saint, or no, it's not that. Curanderos are no saints. On the contrary, they are people who are feared and controlled by their societies because of their capacity of doing evil. So watch out, because when you have a saint in front of you, you open up, you are vulnerable. And this is the origin, in my opinion, of case of sexual abuse and financial abuse, which is you cannot know to what extent, but they do exist, definitely. Another of these moral fantasies, in my opinion, is that considering these plants sacred. Well, sacred is a term that is intimately related to Catholicism. It has two sides, so to say. It has the side of the divine side, which is the good, and clearly ayahuasca doesn't enter. There is no local category that is sacred. Ayahuasca is poison medicine, which is used for both properties, and curanderos are always in shamanic wars. They are able to do evil and bad. So ayahuasca is not divine, and the second side is that the sacred is restricted. But as we've seen, restricted can be only set by an elite, and there is no elite here. There is no orthodoxy, there is no church here, there is no medical association here saying what is good and what is bad. So it's not sacred if it's not restricted or divine. And coming to the end, I don't know if I've been negative, perhaps. Well, I just try to explain, as I see through my experience, the subject. Of course, I'm not entering in the effectiveness of one system or the other. Where they're entering a traditional shaman system, I tell them to go to a place in Iquitos where they work very well. Well, that's it. But no, it's true. My analysis is not to mine the picture of anybody's, and the problem with the stereotypes and coming there and expect these stereotypes is that we're not seeing the true wealth and the true value of indigenous cultures, of local cultures, that could teach us a lot if we were able to get out of our mind the stereotypes of the good world, the Indian with the feather and the guardian of nature, that prevent us from seeing Thank you very much.